Hello, and welcome to another virtual author chat at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles. I'm especially delighted today because we have not one and not two, but three distinguished authors joining us to talk about Brian Andrews and Jeffrey Wilson's new book, Dark Intercept. Our authors include Julia Spencer-Fleming, but before we begin our chat, I do want to stop for a moment and give a brief commercial message for Dark Intercept. We do have copies at the Poison Pen. We would be more than happy to send one out to you or hold one at the store. If after hearing the chat today you find yourself intrigued, just give us a call or go online and we would be happy to hold a copy or copies for you. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Julia Spencer-Fleming, Brian Andrews, and Jeffrey Wilson. Thank you.
And I'm going to do one other real quick commercial for you as well. We actually have kind of a special thing going on right now. If people order books through any brick and mortar store, including Poison Pen, maybe even especially Poison Pen, one of our favorites, and they send us through our website an email showing that they purchased the book, we will send them the first 125 people that do that, we will send them a signed book plate for the book, as well as a unit patch from our Shepherd's unit within the Shepherd's universe. So another good reason to order your book through the Poison Pen.
That's great. Thank you.
That is extremely cool. That is a neat idea. Now I'm instantly thinking, what kind of merch can I do for Miller's Kill? It'd be like a, police officer's patch or something like that. So I wanted to open this with saying that I'm halfway through the book, so we're not going to say anything that's going to spoil it for me and our readers, our listeners, but I'm just loving it. But as I'm going through this, I'm thinking the elevator pitch for Dark Intercept should be Jack Reacher meets the Da Vinci Code meets The Exorcist, because it's just this wonderful combination of straight up kind of a tough guy action mystery thriller, plus we're getting these hints of this secret society that is running kind of a parallel security that nobody else knows about, plus these supernatural events that start out right at the beginning with a very mysterious bang, and you're getting sucked in and thinking, what are we dealing with? So it's different. It's really different in the way that when I first read Charlaine Harris's Sookie Stackhouse series, was Southern fiction, mystery, vampire romance. It was like a mix that nobody had ever thought of before. And I feel like what I'm reading with Dark Intercept is a mix that nobody ever thought of before. So tell me the genesis of this, guys.
Well, first of all, that's very, very kind of you to say. I like that description. The idea of cross genre has been sort of buzzing for, I don't know, probably a decade now, right? Really taking on 5 or 6 years ago. And so we might look like we're geniuses to jump onto that, but we never really thought of it as a cross genre book. We've been writing military thrillers, action thrillers, covert ops for a number of years. You've got 15 or 17, however many books we have now. So we didn't really think of it as a cross genre as much as just sort of adding a layer to the genre we write in now, adding this faith-based supernatural element of spiritual warfare and crisis of faith. So it didn't really feel as much cross genre to us as just sort of adding a layer to the Andrews and Wilson brand of the things we've been doing. Brian, is that fair, do you think?
I like the adding a layer, metaphor. We talk about that a lot. In our other series, we talk about this idea that the intelligence community and covert operations is sort of like an onion. You're operating, and if you peel back one more layer, you find there's another whole universe of information that maybe your clearance, your security clearance level didn't let you have access to, or maybe your job didn't let you have access to that information. But once you're immersed in that new world, suddenly your eyes are open to, oh my gosh, there's more here than meets the eye. And I think that you, Julia, you really hit on that. And Jeff sort of set me up to make this point, which is when you start digging into Dark Intercept, that's the experience we want you to have. You know, you think it's going to be one thing, but as the story unfolds and Jed is going on his journey, you know, you're peeling back the layers, and there's much more than meets the eye going on for the characters in this story.
Yeah, and I'm really enjoying the characters. You know, Jedediah Johnson is our lead, and you know, at first you think, okay, he's action guy, but he's got all these vulnerabilities. We open, he's been in the Navy for 17 years. He's been a SEAL, presumably for most of that. But he's done. He's aged out of the teams, and he is retiring. And he's thrown into. He gets a call from his childhood friend that he hasn't spoken to, also in 17 years, and is brought back to his hometown, where he's both familiar and a stranger. And he's someone who is literally wounded, which I also found very refreshing. He's a guy who's been using his body hard for the better part of 2 decades, and you know, he's got this pain in his hip, and he, you know, he feels it when he gets hit, and you know, unlike like Jack Reacher, who is now 55 and still taking down the entire Oklahoma defensive line in single combat. So you know, he's a man who's sort of been through it, and also is carrying with him the psychological wounds and scars of a life spent in with violence in service to his country. And also, as I'm discovering, reading in, he's got some psychological scars from a very mysterious episode that happened in his past, which I haven't gotten to. So I didn't read it. So I'm just loving this character. Can we talk about him a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you really started that off beautifully with how you assessed him. When we started thinking about Jed as our hero and the center of this story, we talked about the fact that, you know, this is a man who, like you said, he's physically broken, he's emotionally broken, and he's spiritually broken when we meet him. And even in chapter 2, when we see he's at his retirement party, he's already disengaging, he's already asking himself, what is my purpose? You know, he needs a new purpose. He's lost his purpose. And like you said, you've been very astute in picking up that he's also running away from something traumatic in his past. Jeff, you want to talk about that whole element of running away from crisis and how we have to deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was fun to write Jed, but I'll sort of segue into it by saying one of the things that we wanted to do with Jed that is actually pretty similar to what we did with Chunk in Sons of Valor and Dempsey in Tier 1 is we set out from the beginning to write a character that's realistic. We don't, in any of our books, write the superhero characters that are invincible, and they're flawed. You see that through their relationships. You see that through their inner monologue. They're driven, obviously, and they're heroic, but they are real. We try to write gritty, realistic action because of our backgrounds in the military. In Jed, it was more of a challenge because we wanted to write something realistic that added that faith element. And so when you think about people that have served, we've been 20 years at war now. I've been in Iraq and Afghanistan, and you know, we're military people, and we have seen the toll that takes on people. And we write about that in our other books, but what we wanted to do here was address that faith-based aspect, the crisis of faith that can happen when you are confronted with true evil. You asked earlier, what was sort of the genesis of this? And I didn't really give you a good answer. The good answer is, you know, Brian is my best friend. So in addition to working together and writing together, we spent a lot of time chatting and having a glass of wine and that sort of thing. And we were having a social conversation about war and the things that I've seen and done. And he posed this question. He said, Jeff, have you ever felt like you were in the presence of pure evil? Like not a bad guy, not a bad person, but something bigger than that, something more than that. And I told him I felt that I had, indeed, overseas. And from that, which was not a brainstorming session about writing a book, from that sort of grew this idea of building a character who had that crisis rather than the tragic backstory of a classic thriller. His crisis is, you don't think of a Navy SEAL as running away from anything, right? But he's
Right.
built his whole life. He became a SEAL running away. He became a SEAL running from having confronted evil, and in his mind, failed that test. And so his entire life has changed and gone in a different direction. And that was an important element for us in this story, because we want to develop his character as someone that people who have experienced crisis can relate to. And it's not unique to wartime. There's a lot of wartime veterans who relate to Jed, but anybody that has suffered loss, anybody that has had that moment in their life where they said, what is God up to? Like, what's going on here? I don't understand. Can there be a God that would let this happen, right? Those questions that creep into the normal human existence. And we wanted to flesh that out through this character of Jed, and we wanted to do it in a big way. And so that's why we built it sort of that way. But he's complicated.
I love that. Well, he is complicated, and that is something I think that happens to everyone. Since we've been talking, around and mentioning faith, we should tackle that head on. And what I want to tell people watching this is not a preachy book. It's not, I think one of you described being worried that people would think it was going to be, the Amish lady on the front cover looking yearningly into the, what this is, it reminds me of the way that I try and write about faith in my series, which has an Episcopal priest at the heart of it, which is it's about people for whom faith is a part of their lives. For some people, it is bedrock foundational. For some people, like Jed's friend David, who is important. This his daughter has been kidnapped, which kicks off the action in this. Someone who, sort of ignored faith when he was young and then has come to it very fully as an adult. He's studying to be a Methodist minister. And then somebody like Jed, for whom faith is a real question. He struggles with it. He wonders, which is very realistic. I find it, as a practicing Christian, I find it really annoying to read books where everybody is just like, yes, and Jesus solves all my problems. It's like, Jesus does not solve all my problems. He is there for me to put, now I'm going to start getting religious, but to put my faith in and to give him my heart. But there are still problems here in this world that we have to deal with. And faith is meant to help us with that. And that's what we see in this book. So, I can say, I also like the fact that there's a variety of religious expression. We've met Catholic priests. We've got our young Methodists. We've got other people who seem to be from other faith traditions. I find that very cool because that is also realistic. We live in a world where a lot of different expressions of our religious practices happen, but underneath it is this faith running through our lives, which is something that happens for so many people. I love to see it reflected here.
Well, thank you. And I think it brings up an interesting point about our approach to this book and sort of what's going on in, if you want to label it faith-based fiction or Christian fiction or whatever. I should say, we've been writing together for a long time, and we write some pretty, butt-kicking action thrillers, right? There's a little bit of language, there's a lot of violence. And we didn't look to shift into a different genre, if you will. We didn't set out, and here's the best way to say it, I guess. We don't view this as a faith-based book. We view this as an action thriller with a faith-based element, because in all of our books, we try to write about the human experience. And that is simply another part of the human experience. If you make your action thriller book all about that, like what you were alluding to, and everyone is just all feel good and it's all going to be okay, and there's no tragedy because God is with me, and well, then that's not very realistic. If you write a book where faith is not mentioned at all, that's also probably not very realistic, right? Because faith and questions of faith, whatever the answers turn out to be for each individual, is a part of the human experience. And so rather than setting out to write a Christian fiction or a faith-based book, we wrote a book about the human experience, an action thriller. Fans of Andrews and Wilson will find what they're looking for here. It's a fairly classic action thriller, other than some of the supernatural elements that were fun to play with. So I think that that's a good point to bring up and sort of address head on what the goal was. We have faith elements that I hope people will take out of the book and start a conversation, have discussion about, think about, but that's not the purpose of the book. The purpose of the book is to entertain. It's a thriller, and putting that thread in it to us just made it more realistic rather than less. And by the way, just one last thing, God bless Tyndale House for supporting that, for embracing that. From the very first conversation, we made it clear that we write gritty, realistic thrillers. There's going to be violence. There's going to be some bad things. There's going to be some things that scare you. And they were all in and very supportive. Karen Watson and her team over there, fantastic believers in this project. So it is a little different from Tyndale House though, right?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like that, it was, if I hadn't known they were your publisher, I, would have guessed any one of the big five, because it really does feel exactly like gritty action theater, thriller with people, with characters who have faith, and or not, and they're struggling with it. So we mentioned the action, and I want to ask about that because, and I'm going to put my actual author hat on here. I was really impressed. You open up with a prologue of an operation in, I'm trying to remember, Iraq, or yes, and it's one of the things that I know from experience that is hardest to do is write a good action scene. You have a lot of technical elements to handle, particularly when you're talking about, with war, you've got equipment, you've got guns, I write about police, so we've got, police equipment. You don't want to keep using the same 3 words over and over and over again, which is also really difficult. You need to make it flow for the reader, so it's seamless and it's like they're seeing it unfold in their minds. But at the same time, you need to make sure that everything is accounted for. Now, I know you guys have been doing this for a while. This is how many books have you written before this?
I mean, I think between us, we've got 17 or 18 books, probably something like that. And we've done 14 or 15 together.
So you've got it under your belt, but it impressed me. I loved it as a reader, and it impressed me professionally, the action scenes. So talk a little about writing those.
And I think our approach has always been, especially in the other series, is to use a metaphor, this tick on a hound approach. When Jeff and I are both Navy veterans, and anytime you show up to a new command or new unit, you're going to get a quick introduction and they just throw you in. And nobody's holding your hand, walking you around. I was a submarine officer, my first day, you get welcomed aboard and then here's your qual card and get to work, right? So it's upon you, as the service member to learn, how does this community work? How does this unit work? How does this complex submarine work? And where do I fit into it? And what does that do? What's his job? And how do those things interact? And, we know that we're writing for a big cross-sectional audience in all of our thrillers, but we don't want to patronize people. So we've taken this approach of, okay, you're going to come along in this prologue with Jed on this mission. And in the beginning, you might be a little confused because you've never done this before. Maybe you've never served. But hopefully, as authors, we're good at sort of providing you the context and you're in Jed's head as the operation is unfolding. So you might not know what that radio comms communication meant necessarily, but through the context of the scene and how Jed responds and what he's thinking, you'll pick it up. So, okay, you don't know the lingo yet, but maybe by the end of the chapter, you're starting to feel a little more comfortable with this. And you feel like you actually went through something. You earned it, maybe, as a reader, when you got through the end of that chapter, you were there with him side by side. And that's always been our approach to writing action is you're just one of the team members. You're a tick on the hound, so to speak, as the characters go along, and we don't spoon feed you. So that's how we approach it.
It makes for a super effective, reading in the action scenes. I feel that you're very intensely, obviously Jed is our lead character, but I feel very intensely exactly that inside his head when I'm reading. So we've been talking about the book. One of the things that I'm curious about, and I'm sure other people are, is so what is the journey? We all have our writer's journey. You guys are Navy. Where's the switch? Do you walk out of the, base gates on the last day? You say, "Hoo-yah, now I'm going to be a novelist." What are your journeys? How do you come to be novelist?
It's funny because our journeys are very different. It's polar opposites, I would say, in fact. So I am the one who has the attention deficit disorder. As you can tell from my bio, I've done a half a dozen or more different professions. I've been a pilot, and I've been in the military. I was a surgeon for a while, and all these different things. But for me, the thread through my entire life from the age of 10 was writing. I started creative writing when I was literally 10 years old. I published my first short story when I was about 14. And so in each phase of my life, I've always turned to writing, mostly for my own entertainment, sometimes for catharsis, sometimes just because, that story gets inside you. You can relate to this, Julia. It whispers to you in the middle of the night. You're either going to write it or it's going to haunt you. You have no choice. And so I've always been a storyteller, and I've always been a writer. And I didn't come to writing full-length fiction novels until later in life, but writing has always been a part of my life, and it's sort of the glue that brings all these other schizophrenic parts together for me and allows me to take those things and do it. Making the decision to become a full-time writer came later after I met Brian, and we can talk about that later. But in terms of the genesis, childhood for me, always been there. And then Brian, your story is like the complete opposite, right?
Yeah, I never considered myself a writer. When I was in the Navy, Jeff and I always joke about the fact that in the Navy or the Army, Marine, any of the military services where you're, on the front lines, you have these long periods of inaction, and the enemy is boredom followed by moments of abject terror, right? So in these periods where you're not operational, or maybe you're in a stealthy type of operational posture where you're waiting for whatever the next big thing is, you got to pass the time, and people are people, and so one of the ways that we did that on a submarine is we would swap stories. We'd tell stories, and that's how you get to know each other. It's how other people get to know you, and also it's just for me, it sort of harkens back to this very, archetypal idea of sitting around the campfire, this great human tradition of oral storytelling. And so I didn't really think of myself as a storyteller until, right when I was about to actually end my first tour. I remember one of the guys said, you're a really good storyteller. Have you ever thought about writing books? And I said, no, I haven't. He's like, well, you should give that a try. And so then that sort of bounced around in my head for many years. And, I started dabbling, and it took me 8 years to finish my first book, because it was fits and starts. And it wasn't really until I started immersing myself in the community of writers at Thriller Fest, which is where I met Jeff. Once I got immersed in that community of writers and sort of felt part of that group and that momentum and that energy, I think that's when, okay, I can do this. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
I should mention for folks watching this, Thriller Fest is an annual conference in July in New York City, run by international thriller writers, which is a terrific organization. I'm super supportive if you are interested in writing, if you're already published, if you're new to it. It's a very, very welcoming and helpful organization. And the conference also has lots and lots of educational aspects to it. So you guys meet. You've got one person who's been telling stories since he was 10, and another one who has been literally telling stories throughout that. work process go? And this fascinates me, as it does for most solo authors, because if you just write by yourself, it's very hard to imagine how it goes when you are writing with a partner. So what's your process like?
And it was very hard for me to imagine, Julia. So to sort of go into that, we should start with, we had both been writing. I had, I think, 2 books out, and he had 1 out and another one coming. And by the time and that was when we met, we were debut authors at ITW's Thriller Fest. And then a year went by, and he had another book out. I had a 3rd book come out, but we were just friends. And it was Brian who posed the idea, with my background in submarines and your background in special warfare and working with the SEALs, wouldn't it be interesting if you didn't have necessarily an idea for the exact story, but we could collaborate, we could write something together. And like you, I was like, well, I mean, I don't see how does that work? Like, I type a word, you type a word, like, I don't understand how would that even, and of course I knew Preston and Child were doing it. And I think that was just around the time Kathy Coulter was doing it with JT Ellison. And so I knew that people did it, but I just couldn't imagine how it would work for us. And so really it was Brian who had the vision to do it. But once we started doing it, to me, there's no going back. Like, if you have the right partnership, which we do, we have a friendship, we have a shared business view, a shared creative view, and there's no ego involved. So for us, the process is actually pretty straightforward, but when you hear it, you think it's impossible, or at least everyone keeps telling us that, because we write simultaneously. So we start, like any good author, we start with a what if question, we build our premise, we come up with our idea, and then the most fun part for me, I think, is the brainstorming for a couple of weeks, where we're basically like 2 8-year-olds in the backyard, and we're just like, what if this? Oh no, what if this? What if this? But we sort of map it out, and then we divide it into 3 acts, like a lot of writers do, and we then take Act 1 and we say, where do we want to go with this? We write in multiple point of view, 3rd person, so it's a natural break for us to sort of split it up. So once we dive in, we've got some bullet ideas in a very rough outline of what each chapter is. And then Brian will be writing chapter 1, 2, 4, 9, 11, whatever. I'm writing the other chapters, and we're writing simultaneously. We communicate we always have work in progress now, but we're always talking as many as 8 or 9 times a day, at least 3 or 4 times a day during that writing process, during our workday. And then every few chapters, we swap them. And I take his and I rewrite them. He takes mine and he rewrites mine. And then they go into this master folder of rough draft. So when you tell writers that, it seems like it would be impossible without a very detailed outline. But because we communicate so effectively and so constantly, because it's our full-time job now, we're able to do it. So did I leave anything out? That's basically what we do.
No, I find that fascinating, because I do know other authors who do it by very detailed outline, but really you guys are kind of doing it by mind meld, aren't you? Because because if you're talking 8 or 9 times a day, that's as we write, you're writing forward and you're thinking, okay, what happens now? Well, maybe this will happen. And then sometimes you stop and you're like, okay, well, if he kicks down the door, he's going to find this. But if he, goes back to get help, he's going to find that, and you weigh that. So instead of talking to yourself like I do, you're just talking to each other.
Yeah, I think for us,
yeah, go ahead, Brian.
The collaboration is our superpower, so for many writers, writer's block is their kryptonite. You get stuck, you waste time, you second guess yourself. And, we don't have that problem, because the minute that, you start to think, I'm kind of stuck, I don't know what to do here, I just pick up the phone and I call Jeff and say, I'm working on this chapter. We'd usually already talked about the chapter, so we knew kind of what I was working on. Here's what I'm working on. Here's what happened. I think we could do this. Do you have any ideas? And we'll say, oh, that's a good idea, but what about this? Did you consider this? And we go back and forth. And then 5 minutes later, there's a path out of the woods. And that's been our secret sauce sort of from the beginning, is this true collaboration. And I will say, for any other authors out there who are thinking about collaborating or writing as a team, One of the most important things that we did early on, and I credit Jeff 100% with this, is he said, I think if we're going to do this, he mentioned it's a business, and it is. But the other thing he didn't mention is he said, we have to take our ego out of the equation. Because with writers, I think especially, our egos get in the way of our ability to be better writers, right? We're so proud of our prose or our idea. We like to guard it. We like to justify it. We sometimes are afraid to stress test it or put it out there for criticism. And when you're team writing or you're co-author pair like we are, you can't afford that. That's going to be destructive. It's going to generate unproductive feelings, And so by taking our ego out, we look at this as, hey, when you pick up a book, it doesn't matter which page you're reading. It wasn't that page 191 was written by Jeff and 202 was written by Brian. It's that every page was written by both of us. It's our book. It's our collaboration. It's Andrews and Wilson's story. I couldn't tell it without him, and he couldn't tell it without me. And one of the ways that we achieve that is we just give each other, free reign to edit anything, anytime, anywhere. He can change any of my prose. He has a good idea. He doesn't like something. He tells me, no problem. I trust him to make that change, and vice versa. And that's why you get this, at least you can answer this question. I'm presuming you didn't say anything about it, but we have a pretty seamless voice all the way through. It's hard to tell who wrote what.
You do. You have a seamless voice. And now I want to pick up a book written by each of you individually and take a look, because it's been my experience. So I know Doug Child, who's here in Maine, and I've read books that he's done individually, and then I've read the Lincoln and Child books, and they're two different voices. I've read the two authors individually, and together it's a third voice. It's not the same as their individuals, which is a fascinating process to me, because, and I'm kind of loving this, because what you each have is both, a first editor, and a, somebody to bounce the idea off, as well, which is another thing that a lot of us don't get, because most of, a lot of authors that I know, I'm very much like this. I don't want to talk too much about the book outside of the book. It's like I'm keeping it in the little pressure cooker because I'm making the secret sauce and I don't want anything to get out. But you guys have each other to share it with and bounce it through.
Yeah, and it's like I said at the beginning, I was the reluctant one. I literally said no. I should say that. Like, he said, let's do this, and I said no. But I offered to help him with it. I said, I can help you with your book because I do have some background in special warfare, and if you want to write about it, I'll help you. And then we started brainstorming. He asked the second time, and I said, dude, no. No, it's not going to work. And then the third time, he manipulated me like a good officer will. And he said, look, let's just write 5 chapters. And if it works, great. And if not, you can keep the story. And he knew I loved the story. So anyway, that's how we started. I was reluctant. And once I did it, it's so liberating. If you have it's not for everybody, but if you have the right person that you're working with, you have complete trust, you have an intimate friendship, you have a business vision that's the same. It is so liberating. You used the term mind meld earlier, and I wanted to jump back to that because that's a real thing now. Maybe not at first, but now I know what Brian's going to do. He knows what I'm going to do. We've been doing it for a while, and it is not made up to tell you that there are so many times where I'm like, oh my gosh, I know what we need to do to resolve that thing we were worried about in part 3. And I'll call him on the phone and I'll say, hey, I've got this idea for part 3. And he'll go, no, wait, I was thinking about it too. Let's do this. And he says the exact same thing that I was just about to say. That happens every week to us now. Yeah. So it really is like this mind meld thing where, we're like, one person. You mentioned how when you saw the child book, Preston and Child book, it was like a third voice. And I think that's right. And I bet if you read my stuff, his stuff, and our stuff, it would sound like 3 different people, because it is. There's Brian and there's Jeff, and then there's Andrews and Wilson. And it really is a third, very unique voice, but it's so much fun. I can't even imagine doing it the other way anymore. As much as I always loved writing, but I don't know that he's ruined me now. I don't think between the two of us, we make one good writer. So
Yes.
I think it takes two good writers to make one good joint writer together there. So what is coming up next for Andrews and Wilson? Where is the Shepherd series going? This says the first, and a cover which I've got because I'm reading it on my phone, is the Shepherd series.
Mhm.
And we won't say any more about Shepherd or what that means. What's next?
We've avoided all the spoilers. Thank you for that, because the first book, we tend to write in 3-act structure in our books, but also in our series. It takes us usually a trilogy to set up an entire start to finish. And the same is true here. Again, God bless Tyndale House for their support, because they have supported the idea of getting the first 3 books in this trilogy that sets the whole story up for us out very quickly. So this book just came out, as you know, on the 7th. Yep. The next book comes out in April, Dark Angel, and the 3rd book, Dark Fall, comes out next autumn. So
wow, that is really fast.
So they come out very quickly for the first 3, so that we can suck people into our universe. So yeah, we're really excited about this. So there's a bright future for this series. I'll let Brian talk more about the other things we have going on in other series, because we're not stopping anything else we're doing. And the only other thing about this series that we can only tease you about is that it has been optioned for television. So we don't have permission to tell any details yet, which is heartbreaking for us. But it has been optioned for television, and we're looking forward to sharing a lot of exciting news about where that's going.
I'm feeling totally vindicated, because one of the questions I was going to ask you is, this seems so cinematic for me. I was going to say, who do you see playing Johnson? So I will ask you that, but Brian, I want you to tell us more about the other Andrews and I almost said Andrews and Child, Andrews and Wilson books.
Yeah, so no, we appreciate that opportunity to talk about some of the other cool stuff coming down the road. So we were very honored to be approached by Tom Colgan and Putnam to take the reins of the Presidential Agent series, which is written by the iconic Webb Griffin. And he passed away a year and a half ago, approximately. And that series stopped at, what was it, Jeff, book number 8? Yeah. And so book number 9, Rogue Asset, is with Andrews and Wilson at the helm. We're writing, we had the opportunity to write Charlie Castile, who's a military veteran character, but does a lot of covert operations stuff. The premise of the Presidential Agent series is that essentially there are some problems that only, so secret, so important, that only can be trusted to one man or a small group, and takes presidential authority to go after those problems. So that's what Charlie Castile does, and it's right in our wheelhouse. I mean, we were so thrilled to be able to pick up that series, and that book comes out December 7th.
Yep, and then Sons of Valor continues. We've got book 2 will come out next June. Book 1 launched this past summer. So that series is doing really well and has been very well received by our readers. We knew that one would be, because they were the ones that demanded it. They loved Chunk Redman, and were constantly asking us to see more Chunk. So if you want to see more Chunk, we'll just give him his own series. And and Tier 1 is still cranking out too. Book 6. There's a little bit of a gap that people are starting to grumble about. We apologize. We had to get these other things launched, but book 7 is going to be coming out next winter, the winter of 22-23. Don't have the exact date to release yet, but it's called Dempsey, book number 7, and it's going to take John Dempsey on his next journey. So we got a lot going on. We don't have time for this chat, to be honest with you.
It's like, what are you doing? You guys need to get back to work. Okay, you're making me feel like really, I need to, as soon as we're done talking, I'm opening up my manuscript in progress and getting to work, because I feel like a real slacker next to you guys. You sound like you need a professional, air traffic controller just to sort of handle the book launches going on.
Yeah, that'd be great. Do you know one?
No. All right. So let me ask you then, who do you see playing? I mean, you don't get to, we all know the authors do not get to choose, as shown most dramatically in the famous case of Tom Cruise playing Jack Reacher, a guy who is 6'5" and weighs, 280 pounds. So I was trying to envision while I was going this, and I thought Vin Diesel, and I thought, no, Vin Diesel's too sort of, I don't know, he doesn't work for me.
You need an everyman, right? Someone who's an everyman.
Yeah, but like a rugged everyman, because he's a big guy. I love the description we get to hear. When he was younger, he was kind of that gawky, skin and bones, like a lot of tall men are when they're teens. But now he's as he did. I'm a big boy now. So give me some ideas. You must have thought about it.
Ryan, you want to start?
I mean, it's tough to imagine, your character portrayed as an actor. It really is, because I don't want to put an idea in a reader's head. And sometimes we talk about maybe it'd be best if, it was an up and coming actor or somebody who, doesn't have that, associate all the baggage of the other characters like a Tom Cruise. So when somebody comes in, if, let's say it was a Russell Crowe or somebody like that, okay, you think of him as Gladiator, but then you also think of him, and when he plays, the vice president, and he's all, done up in makeup and stuff. So it'd be tough. I mean, I don't know, Tom Hopper, I guess, comes to mind. He's kind of an up and coming guy who's big. He's a big guy. He has a presence.
We don't really,
right age.
I never really think about anybody except who I picture in my mind. But I will be honest, now that we have this deal for this TV show, I have been thinking about it. And I agree, it should be someone, it can't be a megastar, because he's got to be he is such an everyman. He's so relatable. But there is one actor that I have thought of that I thought would be great. And that's Pablo Schreiber, who played Tonto in 13 Hours. Fantastic actor. He's the right size. He's that everyman character. And I don't know if it's just because we were on Chris's show recently, and on Battle Line podcast, and we've become friends with Chris. And so I don't know if that's what put it in my head, but just recently, I haven't even told Brian until just now, I have been picturing Pablo Schreiber as a perfect Jedediah Johnson. So I don't know, Pablo, if you listen to podcasts and you're out there, let us know. We'd love to
call your agent.
Call your agent. Have your people call someone's people. We don't have people, but they're
You're going to need people. You're going to need people after this.
We need people. We need people now.
I do think it's worth saying, just even this conversation really brings home something that Jeff and I talk about a lot, which is that the publishing community really is a community, and community with like a capital C. It's just like this. Like, we've met you, we've developed a friendship, and we love the fact that you're here helping support the launch of this book.
Absolutely.
And we try to do the same thing in social media and with other authors, participate and help lift their books up, because it's amazing how small of a community it is and how relationship driven it is. And we've had so many people that have helped us along the way. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all the other authors who've given us guidance, not only in the craft of writing, but also made introductions and just help promote and talk us up and make other people aware of our work. So there's a lot of gratitude in our hearts when it comes to events like this and thinking about our fellow writers and authors.
It's kind of a pay it forward business, I find. A lot of people who are not published think that getting published is a matter of who you know. No, the work sells the work. But once you are part of the publishing community, it runs on relationships, and you get opportunities and you get conversations, and you get to find out really cool things about people like I am today. So I'm going to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the friendships and stuff. I'm thinking I'm I'm going to start running over a list of my friends. Who could I co-write with? Because I also want to put out 6 books in a year.
Yeah, but you do know you only get half the money then too. So
Oh, dang.
I've
Okay.
been trying to talk
That's still
Brian.
3 books in a year, which is my standard is more like 1 book in 3 years. So I could definitely upgrade for that one. So, anything else that you guys want to tell, want to convey to the folks who are watching this before we wrap it up?
My parting comment would be that, it's such a politically charged environment right now.
Mhm.
And I think so many people tend to really, if they're hit with an idea that maybe makes them uncomfortable or isn't in their exact echo chamber of where they like to reside, the immediate reaction is to maybe strike out at it or push it away or try to denigrate it and stuff. And, this book, you said in the beginning, we're not preaching at people. This book is a thriller with faith elements, but we would ask that all readers, when they pick up this book, give it a try to have an open mind to this effect of, this is a story and maybe there's some elements that might challenge my conventions or my thoughts, and that's okay. And it's okay to say, you know what, I disagree with these guys, but some of the things that Jed did were pretty heroic and maybe could translate to my everyday life. If I can be a better version of myself at the end of the day, then that's a victory. That's we always write characters who are striving to be better versions of themselves. So when you read the book, sort of take that away. Hey, these are not 2 guys preaching at me. These are 2 guys telling, hopefully, a good story that maybe gets me thinking about some ideas or inspired in a way that I wouldn't have been if I hadn't picked up the book.
And that's what I love to see changing about what we classically call faith-based fiction, is that idea that it's just for people with a certain belief system. That's insane. Like, we all share a curiosity. We all share questions. We might come up with different answers, but we share these questions. And you don't have to believe as I believe to hopefully enjoy this story. It's about the story and the hero's journey that we've set up. Brian said the other day, cracked me up, I don't believe in wizards, but I do like Harry Potter. And so it's okay. It's okay to pick this book up and enjoy it. Even if you think it might be challenging from your belief standpoint, it's, I hope, still a really fun story that is about the human condition. So we encourage people to give it a try. And if it makes you ask questions, that's great. That's a good thing.
Well, it's making me ask questions, and I think everybody should pick it up and enjoy it, because it is a super read. One of you hold it up so we can all see the cover. Oh, nice.
There it is.
All right, everybody. Dark Intercept by Andrews and Wilson, available at Poison Pen and at your local independent bookstore all over the country.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Julia.
The Poison Pen would like to thank Brian, Jeff, and Julia for joining us today for another virtual author chat. And thank you for tuning in.